Hey everybody, Music Theory 1. This is video number 12, Lead Sheet Symbols. This is David Farrell. Today I'm going to be talking to you about another useful way we have to describe the chords that we have in our music. Lead sheet symbols are used in a lot of popular traditions and folk traditions and different traditions in terms of communicating the harmonies that we're looking at. And so today we're going to talk about how to interpret these, how to read them, how to write them. Here we go. So we've got some triads here, our four familiar triads, and we're going to be figuring out how to talk about these chords using lead sheet symbols. Lead sheet symbols are ways that we can describe harmony. Okay, lead sheet symbols are another shorthand system that exists to tell musicians, especially performers, what chords are going on in a piece. If you've ever played from a jazz chart, if you've ever played from a fake book or a book that gives you the chord progressions in a piece on top of the music, then you've read lead sheet symbols. They're useful for traditions where the music is somewhat improvised. Again, like jazz and popular music, where you tell the player, maybe a guitar player or a bass player or a piano player, what chord to play. But exactly which notes to play in what position, exactly how they're going to do it, lets them have a little bit more freedom. Okay, let's take a look at some of the lead sheet symbols that we could use to communicate the different triads we know. First of all, major triads, the most common chord in most of our music. And so if you see a capital letter with nothing next to it, like our capital C here, then what's being indicated is a major triad, right? We see this chord so much that musicians don't even feel the need to provide anything else. They're just going to give you the big letter and you're going to presume it's major. You might also see that capital letter M. That's another indicator that the harmony underneath that lead sheet symbol is a major triad. Okay? What about a minor chord? Our minor chords need some sort of symbol next to them, right? If they didn't have anything, we'd assume they were major. The two most common things you're going to see in music are a lowercase m to indicate minor, that's one of them, or sometimes a minus sign. Both of these things are often used to indicate minor sonorities. And so when we see them, then we know that the music underneath should be using a minor chord. Our diminished chords are a little bit less common, but they also have a couple of different ways we can abbreviate. One is that circle. We know we've seen that circle when we talked about diminished intervals, and that's used for diminished triads. Sometimes we also just might have the letters DIM written out to tell the player, yes, diminished. Some players might not be as familiar with that symbol, that circle symbol, and so the letters are sometimes used if we don't think the people we're working with might understand what we mean by that one. Last one, augmented. Augmented chords are the least common, but that plus sign is a pretty standard way of notating any augmented triad. And so again, if we see that up top, then that's going to tell us an augmented triad is found beneath. This is a good point before we move to seventh chords for me to tell you that all of this information is summarized in chapter 3 of your book. It's also in the back of your book if you find the second appendix, appendix 2 in your Caustic and Pain. It has a really wonderful page that has lots and lots and lots of lead sheet symbols. And so if you ever encounter something you're not sure of, or if you want to notate something more complex, that's a really great place for you to look. Okay, enough about that. Let's go to seventh chords. Here are our 5 seventh chords, the major seventh, the dominant seventh, the minor seventh, the half diminished seventh, and the fully diminished seventh. All of these can be indicated using lead sheet symbols as well. Again, popular music, jazz music are going to be using these abbreviations. They tend to make sense, but we're going to go over them here anyways, just to make sure you understand what you're seeing. The major seventh chord has a couple of different versions. C capital M7 is a pretty good one to use. That's the one I'm probably going to use the most often. That MAJ7 as well, spelling it out a little bit more clearly, major 7. And also a slightly odd symbol, but that little triangle is also sometimes used for a major 7th chord. I do not know the origin of the triangle for a major 7th chord, but it is seen with some regularity, and so if you see that triangle, you're going to want to remember that is telling you that we have a major 7th chord there. Our dominant 7th, also known as the major minor 7th. This is the most common 7th chord, and because of that, it gets the simplest abbreviation, right? Musicians are not stupid. The one they're going to have to write out all the time, they're going to write the most simply. And so this one is just C7. If you see that capital letter with the 7 right next to it, it's talking about a dominant 7th chord, okay? This is the one that's kind of important to know because it doesn't really tell you a lot, and some people might assume that because there's nothing there, it's talking about a major 7th, but that is not true. It's a dominant 7th. And so when we see just the letter and the 7, dominant. That's what we're looking at, okay? Important one right there. What about minor? Our minor 7th has a pretty simple abbreviation. It really does tend to be that lowercase m7. Okay, when we see a minor 7th chord, we do need something to tell us that it's minor, and that lowercase m paired with a 7 tends to be a common thing. When we're doing these 7ths, do remember that we have to have that 7 there, right? Otherwise, we're going to think these are triads, and so that number 7 is pretty important. The half diminished 7th chord, we've looked at the symbol for this before, that circle with a slash through it, and that's going to be a very common one. I'm including one other one that we see from time to time, which is C minor 7 flat 5. Okay, this is a sort of pasted together version of it where if you imagine that minor 7th chord and you lower the 5th, you do get a half diminished 7th chord. And again, this one is especially useful for musicians who aren't really familiar with what a half diminished chord is. This sort of tells them, well, you know what a minor 7th chord is, just play it with a lowered 5th. And so this can be useful for people, again, who don't really have the background in knowing what every one of these chords is, especially this one, which tends to be the most uncommonly found 7th chord. Last 7th chord coming up, fully diminished. And fully diminished, we tend to see that circle used most commonly, and just like our triad, we sometimes also might spell out diminished. We might spell out D-I-M. C D-I-M 7 to tell us that we've got a diminished 7th chord. Both of these are ones that we can see pretty regularly in music using lead sheet symbols. Okay, so here we've got all the different ways we might notate our 7th chords. Just want to make sure we have these in our heads, make sure we understand both how they look when we see them in music and how to write them to describe the chords that we're going to be writing or to describe music that we see. Okay, both of these are skills we're going to utilize in class. Let's finish with one last thing. I want to talk about inversions. When we indicate inversions in lead sheet symbols, we tend to use what the textbook calls slash notation. Okay? Instead of using the bass position symbols, we tend to just write the note that is in the bass after a slash. Okay? This is because these symbols are often practical, right? They're often used in performance. And if you have a piece of music that's going by quickly and you see G7, 6, 5, C fully diminished 4, 3, F minor 4, 2, and you're playing the bass part, well, figuring out those bass notes in time would take a lot of work. And so instead, we tend to just write down the note in the bass, like I've done on the chords here. The first one, we have a C major triad with an E in the bass. And so I write a capital C to say that it's a C major triad. And then after the slash, I write E to tell our musicians that E is the note in the bass here. It works the same with our 7th chords. I've got a C dominant 7th chord, and so I'll use the same symbol I would use, C7, and then I'll put a slash G to indicate that G is in the bass. Same with my minor chord here again. It doesn't matter which member of the chord, which inversion we're in. C minor 7, if B flat is the lowest note, then I'm going to write slash B flat. Note that in my earlier examples, all the chords were in root position, and so I didn't write slash anything. If a chord is in root position, then we don't write anything, right? We keep it simple, as always, musicians, lazy, trying to not write as much as they can. But when we're not in root position, when we're in any of our inversions, we want to use this slash notation to indicate the bass note of the chord. You've made it to the end of another video. This is it about lead sheet symbols today. We went over this form of notation, a really, really common notation in a lot of different musical traditions for us. Okay, it's a way to communicate harmony, both type of triad and type of 7th chord, as well as inversion, very quickly and efficiently. Tend to be used in performance for performers. Okay, these are things that we want to be familiar looking at, familiar interpreting. And many of them are common sense, the capital M for major, the lowercase m for minor, etc. But we just want to make sure we're keeping them straight and we know the differences when we see them. Thank you for watching, guys. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in class soon. Have a good day.